Rise Up, Chapter 4, An Invisible Companion. Believe while others are doubting.
Jack, you can't go. Winter will be here soon.
Relax, North. Jackson Overland Frost replied, carefree as usual. I'll be back in time to spread a little fun. It's not like I'm spending snoggle talk with Hiccup or anything. Nearby, sitting on a workbench with an egg and paintbrush in hand, was a puka, a giant rabbit-like creature that stood at least 6 feet tall. He was focused on the egg as he timidly laid the brush across its shell.
Let the drongo go, North. Not like he'll be much help in the grand scheme of things.
Drongo? Jack laughed, hugging his staff closer.
Haven't heard that one before.
He rolled his eyes. Nicholas St. North, better known to us as Santa Claus, shook his head.
Ach, don't say such things, Bunny. Jack is important. He brings fun before Christmas.
The puka, Easter Bunnymund, or the Easter Bunny in our world, looked up with his eyes to see if North was being serious.
You're kidding me. He's no more important at Christmas time than I am.
Jack and North exchanged a confused look. North fell right into Bunnymund's trap.
You're not important at Christmas. Christmas is my time.
Bunnymund extended the paintbrush and nodded.
Exactly, mate.
The guardian of fun hopped down from his perch on a low fence.
Very funny, kangaroo.
He gave a fake laugh.
I'm not a kangaroo, mate,
Bunnymund said defensively, hopping down from his stool and standing at his full height, still pointing the paintbrush at Jack.
Sure.
Jack returned his attention to North.
Come on, North. I promise I'll be back in time. I told Hiccup, Rapunzel, and Merida that I'd visit before Christmas.
North shook his finger at him.
I don't like this, but... His hand fell and he sighed. Father Time has already called you. He wants you, Jack. He wants Jack?
Bunnymund was less than pleased.
Why? Did not say. But Jack needs to go now.
Sweet! Jack pumped his fist. He then hopped up into the air, summoning the wind to carry him. As he flew out a window, he turned and gave a playful salute to the two.
See you later, kangaroo. I'm a rabbit, mate.
That had been a week ago now. Jack still hadn't returned, and the Guardians were having a meeting now at Father Time's observatory. They would have gladly held it in North's toy shop like normal, but the place was currently abuzz with Yeti activity as they prepared for Christmas. It was a stretch on North's time to even show up. In attendance were Nicholas St. North, Santa Claus. He was working on painting a wooden fire engine that was destined for a little boy named Jason. Easter Bunnymund, the Easter Bunny. With Easter being far enough away, he decided it was fine to leave his egg and paintbrush at home for this meeting. Toothiana, the Tooth Fairy. She hovered off the ground. Littler Tooth Fairies came and went as she instructed them on what sectors they should hit for new teeth. Sanderson Man Snoozy, the Sandman. He sat in anticipation. This was going to be exciting for him. Mother Nature, she sat next to her husband, and Father Time, Mother Nature's husband, who sat at the head of the table.
Please, let us start meeting,
North said, managing a quick glance away from the toy fire engine.
I'm very busy man this time of year, you know.
We know, Mother Nature said with a kind smile. Go to Sector 16. Little Maurice was playing hockey with his father earlier today. Toothiana told one of her fairies. Just as that one left, another came flying up to her. Sector 93. Janie was playing with her friends, and... Her words faded out as Father Time began to speak. There was a harumph as he cleared his throat.
I called you all here because there is a temporal disturbance. Harumph.
Temporal disturbance? North asked. He let the toy truck lower as he stared at Father Time.
What kind of temporal disturbance? Harumph. All I can tell you is that Jack Frost is involved, and... Harumph. Something familiar.
All eyes were on him, but he was quiet.
Well, spit it out, mate, Bunny ordered.
Bunny? Tooth, who had also turned her attention to the meeting, chided. He shrugged in defense.
What?
Father Time's exhale drew their attention back.
Black.
Black? Mother Nature repeated. Her husband's clues could be vague, she knew, but they had never been this vague, not as long as she could remember. Everyone looked at Sandy as the golden dust he used to communicate formed an image above his head.
Pitch,
North growled.
Bunny sighed. You've gotta be kidding me.
What? Tooth looked from Sandy to Father Time and Mother Earth. Pitch? He's back? Mother Earth looked to her husband. He was quiet now. The hint he had given had been so vague that she couldn't give Toothiana a definite answer. Now the Fairy Queen looked back at North. We have to do something. I know, North replied. He started trying to think. We could go in the past and stop Pitch, but it's Christmas time. I can't leave. Sandy shook his head. He couldn't leave either. His job was to give good dreams to people every night, make sure they had a good night's rest. If he missed his job even one night... Well, I can't go, Tooth said. I don't get the pleasure of working one day a year. I have teeth to gather every day. If I'm not here to help my fairies... All eyes slowly drifted to Bunny. He had been quiet, and for good reason. What, me? Bunny questioned. I don't want to go after that idiot. Mother Nature sighed. You're the only one who doesn't have anything to do for another few months, Bunny munned. Someone needs to go find out what's going on. The Puka opened his mouth to object, but then closed it. He had no argument. His only problem was that Jack was in the past. He agreed that they needed to find out what Pitch was up to, and if Jack wasn't there, then Bunny would hop right to it. But Jack was there. I don't wanna, he whined, seeing that that was his final defense. Everyone just stared at him. Sandy raised his eyebrow. He sighed. Fine, I'll go, but not to help Jack. Understood, North nodded. Chills ran down Bunny's spine as he shivered. He hated portal travel. Father Time and North both used it, and it was absolutely sickening. Literally. He actually felt sick right now. But he was where he needed to be, so he swallowed it down and decided to move on. Where'd they send me? He asked, looking around. He was in the middle of a copse of trees. It was a little cold, but he remembered that Father Time told him it would be. Father Time had failed to say why it would be cold, but he did say it would be cold. Bunny's ears pricked up. They moved this way and that before finally settling on one direction. Up. Something was happening above him, and his giant ears were picking up on it. Bunny squinted to try and see what was going on, but the sky was black. Not the natural nighttime blackness, because last he checked it was supposed to be daytime, but rather a very unnatural darkness that sent chills down the spine. It was familiar, too. Then he saw something coming towards him. Flames lapped at the trees around the object as it plummeted towards the ground. His eyes widened. Oh, crikey! Bunny took to his paws. The object was on a collision course with him, not the ground. I'm surprised you Guardians reacted so quickly. I thought it would have taken more to convince you to come out and play. Bunny had run behind a tree to avoid the flames and any debris that may go flying when the crash was over. He now stepped out from behind the tree, boomerang in hand. Well, well, look who it is. Standing before him was the man known as Pitch Black. Well, calling him a man was a bit of a stretch. He was the boogeyman, but he was a ghost, just like the Guardians. Pitch looked around, waiting for more Guardians to pop out from behind trees. Then he realized, You're the only one here, aren't you? He laughed. Marvelous. This is just perfect. His face hardened into an evil grin as black dust nightmares, horses made of the black dust he used to give humans nightmares, materialized beside him and stalked toward Bunny. You've all just made things much easier for me. The nightmares burst forward. Bunny threw his boomerang before jumping into the air, avoiding the wave of dust horses. His giant rabbit feet smashed into a nightmare on his way down, smashing it to dust particles once more, while his boomerang took out 4 others. But there was an endless supply. They started to overwhelm him, pouring over him like waves over a bad surfer. Through small cracks in the barrage, he could see Pitch, with a few of his creations, peeling open the machine that he had caused to crash. They pulled the occupants free. Pitch cast a smirk back at the overwhelmed Guardian. Then he and his small detachment disappeared into the forest with their captives. No! He tried yelling, but no one could hear him. There was no one nearby, and the nightmares made it hard for him to even hear himself. It took some doing, but he finally stomped the remains of the last nightmare out of existence. He started to hop after Pitch, thinking that if he could just catch up, then he'd be able to save the kids. But it wasn't to be. A groan caught his attention as he passed the machine. Bunny looked through the flames. Still inside was a woman with black hair. She looked like she was starting to come around. He looked back in the direction Pitch had gone, judging his options. If he left her, then she'd probably die of asphyxiation. But if he didn't go after the children, Pitch's plan for them had to be something horrible. "They should have sent Sandy," Bunny mumbled as he hopped into the machine. He threw the woman over his shoulder fireman style and was about to leave when he noticed a hamster in a ball. "You're kidding. They brought a hamster?" He rolled his eyes and picked it up. Smoke started to fill his lungs and a cough escaped him. He shook his head to try and clear it, then he jumped out. Once free of the fire, he placed the hamster ball on the ground and then gently put the woman down. She groaned lightly as he rested her head on the dirt, but there was no more signs of waking. "All right, that's that. Now for Pitch." "There it is." Bunny sat up and looked around. This voice was new, nearby but far away at the same time. What is it? It's a time machine. That's when he started to notice the beating, like the beating of a bird's wings, except much bigger. Bunny twisted around and looked up. Coming down toward him now were 3 dragons, most likely with riders. His suspicions were confirmed as soon as the one with 4 wings landed. 2 people slid down from its back and started to examine the area. He raised his eyebrow. The girl was looking directly at him, his head tilted to the left, curious. "Is she okay?" the girl asked, coming over and kneeling next to him and the woman. "She'll be fine," he assured her. "You can see me?" "Of course." "Who are you talking to?" the boy called over. His attention was turned away when he saw something, though, so he didn't wait for the answer. She held her hand out to Bunny. "I'm Honey Lemon." He stared at her hand and then gave a skeptical reply. "Bunnymund." Boots hit the ground behind them. Bunny turned to look. Honey turned to the woman. Another girl who had apparently been accompanying Honey and her friend had landed and was now approaching the time machine. As he watched her, he realized that the fire had gone out while he wasn't looking. "It looks like this thing got totaled." She reached out, but immediately pulled her hand back. "It's still hot." Bunny looked away as he heard rustling branches. Was Pitch back to finish the job? His nose twitched as he attempted to sniff the air. Smoke still resided in the air and impaired his senses. It stung his nose. "Crikey," he muttered, rubbing his wrists on his nose, trying to get the stinging sensation to stop. They were joined by a man while Bunny was preoccupied. The other girl, whose name was Astrid, walked to Franny's opposite side. Bunny stepped out of her way. "Come on, let's get them back to Burke. Maybe they'll know something about all of our friends." But as they moved her, she started to wake up. She told them that her name was Franny Robinson and that she had come with her son. They informed her that she and the hamster were the only ones there when they had arrived. She asked Dash, the boy that had come with Honey, for the hamster whose name was Rhino. As he started to hand it over, Bunny heard the cracking of sticks and branches. He jumped into a fighting stance, pulling his boomerang out in anticipation of a fight. "No you don't, mate." He reached out and grabbed the creature, only to realize that it was going too fast for even his strength to pull it to a stop. It was only a little after that he discovered this creature wasn't one of Pitch's. It wasn't there with malicious intent, it just wanted a friend. The others caught up and retrieved their hamster. The dragon, for that's what the creature was, watched them sadly as they left. Then it jumped into the sky and flew after them. Bunny had heard about something about a place called Burke and decided that he should keep an eye on Franny, since he wasn't sure if Pitch had just overlooked her or left her behind intentionally. It was just a bonus that Honey was sticking with the woman. He wanted to know how she was able to see him so easily. Bunnymund watched as Honey, Franny, Dash, Astrid, and a woman named Valka hovered in the air. His arms were folded as he just observed. According to Valka and Astrid, this was the last step in the other three's dragon-flying training. He watched as Astrid came down and landed. A shiver ran down his spine. "You'd never find me on one of your mates," he told Astrid's dragon, Stormfly. Stormfly tilted her head to look at him, and then she began to preen for about the 17th time since they returned to Burke. Next was Franny. She copied Astrid's performance almost exactly. The only difference was that she lost her balance once she was down on the ground. Then Dash crash-landed. Bunny cringed when he and his dragon hit. "Here we go." Bunny shoved off the academy's wall that he had been leaning against. His arms fell to his sides. Honey Lemon was next. She seemed to have good form as she came down, but then he realized they were coming in too fast. The dragon's paws hit the ground, seeming like they had meant to land this way. It looked right. For a second. Honey started to lose her seat. Bunny hopped over and caught her. Pushing her back up, he said, "There you go, Sheila." "Thank you," Honey smiled. "I don't think I could have done that." He nodded. Now that they knew how to fly, they decided they needed to go find their own friends. Bunny wasn't sure what had caused Astrid and the rest of these Vikings to help them in the first place, but he was going to find out. "So, what were you all doing out and about?" Bunny asked. Allie bounded after Tick and Tack, looking for someone to play with. "Well, my friend Hero never contacted us after he and his other friends came back into the past, so my other friends and I made a time machine. Dash came looking for his sister, one of Hero's friends, Violet, at our school and got caught up in the time machine with me. When we came to here, we found the village of Burke and asked if they had seen Violet or Hero. Valka, Astrid, and Aerith all led us to where we found Franny and you." Dash and Franny exchanged a look of concern. Dash then turned to Honey. Honey, who are you talking to?" Honey and Bunnymund looked at the two. "I'm talking to Bunnymund," Honey replied. "Who?" Franny asked. "He's standing right here." Honey Lemon motioned to Bunny next to her. "Can't you see him?" Dash slowly shook his head. Beyond him, the dragon's attention had been drawn. Their heads bobbed up and down in a nodding fashion, as if they understood Honey's question and were answering. You don't see the giant 7-foot-tall Australian rabbit standing right here." She reached her hand out to within inches of Bunnymund's fur. Franny took a step toward her, concern covering her face. "Are you all right, Honey Lemon?" Honey looked at Bunnymund. "Why can't they see you?" "Not everyone can see Guardians, Sheila," Bunny explained. "Only those who believe in us." "So, what you're saying..." Her face started to light up. No, is that I just have to make them believe in you." Bunny put his hand over his face and shook his head. The dragons continued to bob in agreement. A whine reached their ears from the direction of Burke. They turned around to see that Iris was sitting on the path and just watching them. Her ears were flat against her head, flatter than they had been. She lowered her head and whined again before motioning back to Burke. "Oh, Iris," Honey said sympathetically. She walked back and hugged the dragon. "I know you made a friend there, but you might be able to see Cloudjumper again. We just have other things we need to do right now." Iris purred. She bent down toward the ground and then brought her head up under Honey so that Honey was seated in the saddle again. The Night Fury then turned and darted back toward Burke. "Iris!" "Honey!" Dash and Franny jumped onto their dragons to chase after them. Bunny sprinted after her on all fours. "Let's cut her off," Franny told Dash. Dash nodded. He took Tick and Tack along Iris and Honey's right, while Franny and Allie went to their left. They managed to pass the two after taking to the skies. Bunny ran alongside Honey and Iris. "What's wrong with her?" Honey yelled to Bunny. Iris skidded to a stop as Tick and Tack and Allie suddenly dropped to the ground in front of her. "Are you okay, Honey?" Franny asked. "What are you doing?" Dash yelled at her, over the growling of the dragons. Bunny tumbled head over heels. He hadn't expected the dragon to stop so suddenly, and he didn't have time to stop himself. "I'm fine," Honey replied. Honey slid down from Iris's back. "Iris!" She turned back to her dragon. Iris let out a pleading whine. She motioned at Burke once more. I don't think she wants to go." Franny slid down from Allie's back. "I don't think she wants any of us to go." Dash was skeptical. "Why wouldn't she? It's not like they even knew she existed before we came along." Now Bunny, who had recovered from his tumble, came back over. "She's trying to tell you something." Iris growled again. "Why did you say those lot were so eager to help you?" Bunny raised his eyebrow at Honey. Their Chief Hiccup. He's missing." "Would you stop talking to yourself?" Dash asked. "It's creeping me out." "I'm not talking to myself," Honey yelled. Franny could tell that they were all on edge. Sure, Honey talking to herself wasn't helping anything, but they were all on edge for different reasons. "Would both of you be quiet?" The three, Bunny, Honey, and Dash, froze and looked at her. Bunny's nose twitched. Yelling at each other isn't going to calm anyone down. Now. She took a deep breath. Let's figure this out. Honey, what do you think Iris is doing? Honey looked at Bunnymund. I saw your friends crash, Bunny explained, and an enemy of the Guardians was there, pitch black. He's behind the disappearance of your friends. He may be behind the disappearance of this Hiccup. I think your dragon knows something you don't, Sheila. So, she wants us to work with Astrid and Narret to find our friends and their chief? Honey asked. Franny raised her eyebrow. Why would Iris want us to work with them? We don't know where their chief is. No. Honey looked at Dash and Franny. Bunny says that he knows who's behind the disappearance of Penny, Violet, Wilbur, and Hero. He thinks that it may be the same person who's behind the disappearance of Hiccup. Dash leaned over to Franny and whispered, She's crazy. She may be, Franny admitted, but I think she's onto something. Tick and Tack's heads popped up. They started examining the area before letting out a low growl. Allie and Iris soon joined in. It was a threatening growl. Bunny grabbed his boomerang as black horses, nightmares, started to creep toward them from the forest. Sheila, he said in a low, warning tone, get going. Honey spotted the nightmares. What are those? As soon as the question was finished, the nightmares transitioned from a walk to a gallop. Run! Bunny yelled. Let's go! Honey yelled, grabbing Franny's hand. Bunny and the dragons followed along behind them, watching their rear. Why are we running? Dash asked as he ran up beside Honey and Franny, easily keeping pace with them. Franny's eyes went wide. How are you doing that? Doing what? There are freaky black horses chasing us. Honey answered Dash's question. Dash pulled to a stop. Franny took her hand from Honey's grasp. Honey turned to look at them. Are you serious? Dash asked. There was nothing chasing us. Honey saw behind them, to the dragons and Bunny and the herd of nightmares coming their way. I'm not crazy, she yelled at them. She didn't understand how guardians worked. She couldn't. This was all so confusing. Tears tugged at the corners of her eyes. I'm not. Franny's maternal instincts kicked in. She hugged Honey. It's okay. Dash just watched for a second. He had only just met Honey, but something told him that she believed what she was seeing. The same thing told him that she wasn't a crazy person. Perhaps everything was getting to her. He sighed and turned around. I believe Honey, he whispered. At the end of his turn, his eyes were open. We should really run. What? Honey pulled away from the hug to look at Dash. Run! He yelled, turning and grabbing both females' hands. You guys look exhausted. The small group had outrun the nightmares and made it back into Burke. Now they stood before Astrid and Stormfly, out of breath. What are you doing back in Burke anyway? I thought you were going to look for your friends. Franny looked at Dash and Honey. Have reason to believe that our friends are in the same place as your chief. You know where Hiccup is? Well, no. Honey averted her eyes and rubbed her arm. We don't know where he is, but we know someone who might. No, we don't. Franny gave Honey a look of warning. We just think that our goals are in the same direction. Astrid raised her eyebrow. Right. Well, I was about to head out. Dash noticed the saddle and provisions on Stormfly. Where are you going? Dunbrock. The terrible terror we sent with Eric came back with a message. He needs me to come immediately. Dunbrock, eh? Bunny sighed. He looked at the ground as he patted it with his foot, testing the firmness of the Burke soil. Will that be a problem? Honey asked. Who are you talking to? Astrid questioned. Dash shook his head. You don't want to ask that. He looked at her and then leaned in to whisper again. She thinks she sees a giant rabbit. Actually, his name is Bunnymund, Honey confirmed. He asked her Bunnymund, actually. Bunny corrected without looking up. He asked her Bunnymund. Wait, she looked at him. Are you telling me you're... Now he looked up. I'm the Easter Bunny, mate. Her eyes lit up. Oh my goodness, that's amazing! You exist? He started to speak, but then stopped. Then he said, who'd you think I was? I don't know. Certainly not the Easter Bunny. The Easter Bunny? Dash ventured. I'm like 13 and even I don't believe in the Easter Bunny anymore. What's an Easter Bunny? Astrid asked. Franny sighed. It's complicated. Well, to Dunbrock then? Oh, how are you going to get there? We could take a boat, I suppose, unless you want to ride one of the dragons. No, Bunny laughed. No flying for me, mate. I prefer the good, hard dirt. He smirked before patting the ground with his right foot. A hole big enough for a dragon opened up next to him. See ya in Dunbrock, then. And he jumped in. The puka emerged from the magical hole right outside the door of Dunbrock's castle. As he headed inside, he was oblivious to the fact that his hole didn't close up immediately. Instead, the dragons, who could see Bunny as clearly as Honey could, had taken the opportunity to save themselves hours of flying. Once their riders were mounted, the dragons took the initiative and jumped down the rabbit hole. It was an interesting experience for everyone, but more so for those who didn't believe in Bunny. Since they didn't believe, they thought their dragons were diving into the solid ground. But when they opened their eyes, they miraculously found themselves outside Castle Dunbrock. How? Astrid asked, her eyes wide. Dash slid down from Tick and Tack's back, shaken. That was amazing! Honey squealed excitedly as she dismounted Iris. Franny slid down from Allie, while Astrid slid down from Stormfly. I have no clue what just happened, but it looks like we're here. Yeah, Astrid was awestruck. How did you do that? She asked, looking to the three. Dash was the first to realize what she meant. We didn't do anything. The dragons did. Actually, Honey gave a smug smile. No, Franny insisted. It was not the Easter Bunny. Honey nodded. Yes, it was, she replied in a sing-song voice. I don't care who or what it was right now. Astrid headed to the door. We're here. We saved our dragons a lot of energy, and Eret needs us. To their confusion, the doors were already open from Bunny's entrance. Eret met them at the door, having come to close them after something had blown them open. That was rather quick, Eret said as he stood looking at them. Wasn't it? Astrid chuckled nervously. So this is Dunbrock Castle. Eret nodded. Come on. They followed him into the building, with Eret closing the doors behind them. At the other end of the room was a long table. It looked like a slightly modified version of their great hall. Skullcrusher was relaxing on the floor at one end of the table, while two greyhounds, tried to get him to play with them. Sitting at the table was a man with curly red hair and a curly red beard. Next to him was a beautiful, dainty woman with brown hair tied back in a long braid. And next to her were three similar-looking little boys, each with curly red hair and baby faces. Once they reached the front of the room, they stopped. Eret took it upon himself to perform the introductions. These are some of the friends I told you about, he told the man and woman. This is Astrid Hofferson, Honey Lemon, Dash, and Franny Robinson. Honey now realized why the dogs were actually bothering Skullcrusher. They didn't want him to do anything. They wanted at Bunny. She stifled a laugh. Eret continued the introductions. And these are King Fergus, Queen Eleanor, and Princes Hamish, Hubert, and Harris. Astrid bowed slightly, attempting to be polite. Pleasure to meet you. Then she looked around and added, Excuse my bluntness, but where is Princess Merida? We need to talk to her. We've already told your friend here. She's off with her own friends, Queen Eleanor replied. She looked up from her knitting before continuing in a serious tone. Your friend made a grave mistake. Almost cost him his life. What did you do? Astrid snapped at Eret. Fergus laughed out loud. He met the boys first. Bunny snapped out of his frozen daze when he heard Fergus's laughter. For the first time, he noticed that Honey and the others had arrived. Astrid blinked. How is that a grave mistake? They ambushed me outside of Dunbrock, Eret admitted. I could have gotten away, of course. Of course. The Viking girl rolled her eyes. But they're friends now. Eleanor smiled. Aren't you, boys? They all looked over to the triplets, only to find that Franny had gone over and was playing with them and their toys. Fergus and Eleanor exchanged a raised eyebrow. Oh, she's a mother too, Honey explained. We're actually looking for her son. Which is another reason we really need to see the princess, Astrid said. Before they had mounted their dragons to leave for Dunbrock, their hypothesis had been explained to her, and if this would help them get what they needed. Eleanor sighed. I'd love to help you, but Merida went to Corona to meet her friends. She's been gone longer than expected, but she does that. Bunny shook his head, still squatting on Skullcrusher's back. This isn't good. Not good at all. What do you mean? Honey asked, looking at him. Fergus followed her line of sight and opened his mouth. Dash raised his hand, stopping him, and shook his head. It's not worth it. Fergus shut his mouth. Something happened in dragon training? Aerith asked Astrid. Astrid shrugged. She was still unclear on this herself. I just remembered the names of that idiot's friends. There's Hiccup, Merida, and Rapunzel. By idiot, Bunny of course meant Jack Frost. Honey wasn't aware of this, but she wasn't about to interrupt. Jack's missing. Hiccup's missing. Merida's missing. What are you saying? Well, I already told you we'd find your friends the same place we'd find Astrid's. What do you think I mean? Pitch black? Bunny's ears bobbed as he nodded. The boys' heads popped up. Everyone looked at her. They didn't recognize the name, but it sent shivers down their spines. Who's Pitch Black? Aerith asked. Honey shook her head. I don't know. I don't understand. She looked back at Bunny. What would he want with Hero, Violet, Wilbur, Penny, Hiccup, and Merida? The conversation seemed very one-sided as she spoke, but what she was speaking about kept their attention. Well, I know Jack and his mates have dealt with Pitch in the past. He may want revenge for that. I don't know what he'd want with your mates. They've never dealt with the boogeyman, have they? I think I'd know if they had. Hero could never keep a secret like that. Keep a secret like what? Frenny asked. Honey turned to them all. Are you guys sure you can't see the rabbit? Rabbit? Fergus roared. She frowned. Then she noticed a painting that seemed to be in progress on the other end of the table. Do you have some paint? Bunny watched Eleanor give Honey the paint and paintbrush. At first he thought she would just paint a picture of him on the floor or something, but then he noticed that she was coming towards him. Wait, what are you doing? Just hold still. In a matter of moments, his face was different shades of pink, red, and blue. She stood back and admired her work before turning to the spectators. There, can you see him now? All heads shook no. Fergus leaned over to Eleanor and whispered something that caused her to elbow him. Dash took a deep breath. Okay, you know what? I saw those weird shadow horses earlier. Maybe you're onto something with the Easter Bunny. He closed his eyes, took another deep breath, and then opened them. There was silence for a second. He was just staring in Bunny's direction, but Honey couldn't tell what he was seeing yet. Why'd you paint him pink? Honey started to laugh, tears of joy tugging at her eyes now. You can see him! Aerith raised his eyebrow. He couldn't see him before. Wait, what? He's been squatting there for a bit. At least since you lot arrived and started talking about him. You see something? Astrid asked. Well, that's funny, Bunny said thoughtfully. He couldn't see me earlier. He's a quick believer, ain't he? Why can't the rest of us see him? Fergus looked at his triplets. Do you boys see him? They nodded. Aerith thought on Bunny's choice of words. He then turned to Astrid. You believe that if Thor came to Berk, you'd be able to see him, right? Of course. Who wouldn't see him? He's Thor. Exactly, Honey piped up. Just believe that there's a giant rabbit in the room and you'll see him. At first no one was sure if it would work, but finally they all saw the puka perched on the dragon's back. Isn't this nice? All eyes turned to the entrance of the hall. Standing there was a pale figure dressed in black. Standing beside him, on either side, were nightmares. They reared their heads and snorted, pawing at the ground restlessly. Fergus hopped up from his seat, grabbing the axe he kept beside his chair. Astrid pulled her axe from Stormfly's saddle. Stormfly's and Allie's tail spikes flared up in preparation for a fight. Bunny started to lose his balance as Skullcrusher got to his feet. Franny and Eleanor went to the triplets. Aerith grabbed his recently returned sword with one hand and put the other out to protect Honey, since she didn't have any visible weapons. Dash looked down at Rhino. He hadn't let him go much since they retrieved him from Iris. Pitch, Bunny growled. You know. Pitch, the intruder, said with a distant voice. I really thought this would be hard, but if this is the best you have. He looked up at them. Then I don't think I have anything to worry about, and your friends have nothing to look forward to. What have you done? Astrid yelled at him. Wouldn't you like to know? Bunnyman grabbed his boomerang. He went to step down from Skullcrusher's back, only to be reminded by a fury of barks why he was up there in the first place. Pitch laughed. The room started to fill with the black dust. Is that fear I sense? Fergus was vibrating with rage. He raised his axe above his head and charged forward while shouting out his battle cry. The dust started to take on form. A loud roar echoed throughout the hall as a giant black bear filled with arrows appeared. Hamish, Hubert, and Harris all ran to their mother. She wrapped her arms around them but was unable to remove her eyes from the bear. It was the perfect copy of a foe they had faced in the past by the name of Mor'du. Unbeknownst to Eleanor and Fergus, other creatures were forming out of the dust. A man in a kabuki mask formed next to Mor'du, causing Honey to stare. It wasn't possible, was it? Dash was seeing a supervillain that he and his family had faced, a man by the name of Syndrome. But he's dead. Drago Bloodfist smashed his staff onto the floor, drawing Eret and Astrid's attention. Skullcrusher shook his head and pawed at the ground, preparing to charge. This was the man who had killed his former rider. He wouldn't get away again. Pitch smirked at Bunny. The nightmares and dust constructs charged forward. Before they made contact, they all faded back into the black dust they were made from and filled the room. Once it dissipated, Pitch was gone. End chapter 4.